Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode where I had on a guest and one of my best friends, Christie Williams. She's the VP of Employee Success at SoftDocs, and she's a huge pillar of the Community Engagement Academy. She's been on my last show, Flip Flops and People Ops, which we don't work on anymore. We're here at Engagement Academy. But she was on that show 5 times, and she would have been on more if I had more time to record more episodes, because her perspective and her storytelling is so useful from the practitioner side of the business. Remember, I bring the disengaged employee perspective, and that's the piece of the content that's been missing for majority of HR trying to search in the dark for answers. She's a badass leader at her company, and she's got her HR function really dialed in. And today we just thought we'd talk about something that she and I both deal with, which is ADHD in the workplace. We talk about how we manage our ADHD, personally, when we're working. We talk about how she empowers employees and how she approaches accessibility versus accommodation. We talk about all the good that accessibility leads to when you have the headspace and the time to think critically to make sure you have certain strategies in place. And then we talk about other things that she and I have in common, like there's a book called Fierce Conversations. We talk a lot about having more emboldened, honest, transparent, authentic conversations with employees, managers, and leaders. And even talk about a few ways to use AI in HR. And that is definitely another episode that will be coming soon, because you need to find ways to work smarter, not harder, especially if you have ADHD, because your brain fires off in a brilliant way in a million different directions and it makes you nuts. And just in case no one's told you, because I kind of needed someone to say this to me at some point in my career, if you have ADHD, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are very likely wildly creative and empathetic, and you tend to jump around and bounce around to different stuff. So this episode, I hope, makes you feel seen and just gives you a different way to think about how to support employees who also have this amazing neurodivergent way of getting their work done. There's nothing wrong with any of us, okay? I'd love feedback, and definitely connect with Christie on LinkedIn. I have got a link to her profile and mine in the show notes, and a link to my Community Engagement Academy where you can have access to people like her and me and have actual real life conversations to talk about what's unfolding at your organization. If you ever need help, which I know you all do, you need someone to talk to and other people in HR to meet with to bounce ideas off of and come to the best right answers. So enjoy the episode, and I look forward to seeing you in Engagement Academy, where Christie and I are both there, both Christies. Okay, talk to you soon.
We're live. We did it.
2 Christies. I never see my name anywhere, so it's always funny when I see it next to yours.
I know. It's funny when you text me, because I'm like, oh, nope, that's not me. That's her.
Well, when I send you voice memos, because that's what close friends do, is you got to hear the tone. And I'll be telling you about something I'm trying to figure out, and I'm like narrating my own thoughts, like, Christie, you can't do this. But it sounds like I'm yelling at you, but I'm actually describing myself. It gets you got to pay attention to keep up.
I love it. Speaking of keeping up, that's really what we're talking about today. I have a diagnosis of ADHD.
I do too. I think a lot of people either don't know they have it, and also modern life is very distracting, but go on.
So today I just thought we could talk about accommodations for ADHD. Mm-hmm.
Let's go backwards to go forwards. If I could stop cutting you off. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
You did a lot to heal me around over many years, many conversations I had with you where I was like, Christie, I'm all over the place. I'm jumping from one thing to the next. We still have those pep talks where I reach out to you and I'm like, I'm doing everything and nothing. And my Eisenhower matrix says everything is urgent and important. And that's not possibly the case. And just telling me that you at times have struggled too, and staying focused and finding the right things to work on and where to focus your energy. Just to know that you as a high performer and someone super experienced also has had moments of struggle was really helpful. So part of this today is just talking about like, hey, a lot of adults have ADHD. It's okay. So thanks for always just being transparent in that way. I think a good friend is just, they level set with you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I try not to be an armchair expert diagnoser, though I've sat in many a therapy session and we'll just say emotional and behavioral health setting between me and my family and people that I love. So I feel like I've gained a tremendous amount of knowledge around certain things, in particular ADHD, a sprinkle of dyslexia, a bit about the autism spectrum. I have a daughter on the spectrum, and a few other sort of emotional, regulation is a big thing that we talk about in our house, getting dysregulated and getting back to feeling regulated, and kind of at your baseline. So I feel pretty experienced. My husband jokes that I'm just a psychiatrist.
Well, I say a lot too on the show with you. Studying psychology is the best way to understand how to survive in HR, because a lot of it's your power of influence. Yeah. But when there's other factors that play, like people who work differently than you and you don't understand it, or you work differently and people don't understand you, you must understand psychology to be understood and to understand others. So you are a psychologist with all the stuff you've read. So am I.
Without all of the schooling to back it. So just so we're clear, everyone, I am not a psychologist.
Neither am I.
A therapist. Though at times I pretend to be one on TV. It feels like, like when you're in HR, you are kind of on a stage in a lot of ways where what's facing out to everyone that you're working with probably looks a lot different than what's behind the curtain, and what you're working with or what your leadership team might be discussing behind the scenes to make sure that your team feels really cared for. So you kind of are like a performer on a stage sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and you just have to put on a good face and get through it until you have the right things in place. So
yeah. Can I, just to kick it off, can I ask you, what early moments in your career were you like, ooh, I work differently, or I need to figure this out. I need to create a system so that I can stay on track?
Yeah, I actually was a late in life diagnosed ADHD person. I was diagnosed when I was 37, which was 3 years ago. And I recognize, looking backwards over time, sort of some of my more impulsive tendencies, and a lot of the things that I would do were actually me kind of being an ADHD person and building this scaffold of support around me and systems and processes that felt fun and exciting and didn't really fail me regularly.
Yeah.
So I, getting diagnosed a lot later in life, for women, ADHD certainly looks a lot different than it does for men. I have inattentive ADHD, which means I can very, very hyper focus on something and just work until it's done. And then when it's done, I just go on to the next thing and focus on that, work. So a lot of times it feels like, in the movie scenes where you're the person's in a room and the world is happening around them, just kind of buzzing by them. That's sort of what it feels like to be my brain sometimes, where all of these things are happening around me and in my sphere, but I'm really focused on this thing. And my daughter actually calls me by my first name when she's trying to get my attention now, instead of saying, Mom. She's like, Christie. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Well, in HR too, everybody needs you. Everyone needs a piece of your time. Someone has a complaint, someone has a question, someone needs your help, someone's onboarding, on top of trying to do employee initiatives, on top of, it's like the run the business, change the business.
Yes.
You might have ADHD, but that's also, some of this is the nature of, you all are expected to do so much, literally, logically, systematically for the business, but emotionally, the context switching in a day, in a week, in a month, in a career. It's I don't think a lot of people are actually, you guys are special, is my point. Because I came from the disengaged side. I haven't worked in HR. The more I learn about all of you, I'm fascinated. You guys are empathetic problem solvers, which sounds like chaos and anarchy at times in your head, like you're saying.
It's kind of interesting because I crave chaos in a way, not in a negative way, but the change, the different pace, the no day is the same, knowing the thing and doing the thing, those things actually work really well with my ADHD. I'm super fortunate to be in a position where I have a lot of flexibility as well. So I tend to work really well and feel really creative later in the day. And that might mean that I kind of take a slower morning getting my day started, and then I'm working a little later into the evening. It works really well for my team because we're kind of spread across all time zones in the US. So we're across 4 different time zones. So I have people that are an hour behind me and they're just kind of getting up when I'm actually getting up on the East Coast. And then I have people 3 hours behind me. So as my day kind of would normally end, we'll say 5 o'clock Eastern Standard, those folks are still, 2 in the afternoon. So I can take some of those meetings later. And it just works really well when my brain feels most activated and most really into the work.
For someone who just heard that and is oh, I work better at night too. What did it look like for you to build trust with Adam, your CEO, and the other teams at large to set that expectation that, yeah, I'm not online at 7 a.m. I mean, maybe you are, but you're not like active.
Sometimes.
But you can trust me, like I will get to it. I work at different hours. Like this is just a cyclical thing. How'd you build that trust?
I think for me, I'm very fortunate that I'm in the role I'm in. I am part of the executive leadership team, and I completely recognize that not everybody else has the same privilege. But I do feel like in our team, for most roles, we have a bit of autonomy in how we do our best work. And sometimes that does look like different hours. We have people that work kind of the 11 to 7 shift and support, so we are able to work with it within the confines of making sure the work is done. Mm. And I really think that that's how you build the trust is make sure the work is done. And you may not have this sort of accommodation and flexibility on the front end of a role because you're still figuring out what you need to do and what actually has to be done. In the early days of my role, I was working tons of hours. I really was. I was working a lot of hours each week just to get things in place. We didn't have a true HR function here before. So I got to build a lot of those things, which was great because my brain was like, this is so fun. I was always sort of getting that dopamine kick throughout my day because I was doing something new and something exciting and creating. And that helped me feel like, oh, this feels really stable for me. And building that trust in my early days really led to being able to have a bit more autonomy in my later days. But I very much work in a give-get. They give me autonomy, so they get out of me whatever they need. So if that is, hey, we need you on this call tomorrow morning at 7, or we need you to fly to this conference, or, can you cover this task within our team that we don't have someone to handle right now? I'm always happy to give of myself because I do get that in exchange. But I also recognize that not everyone has that. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation around accommodations and when you can ask for them, who qualifies for them, what companies have to abide by ADA, and also what it looks like from the company side, because there are times where we can't accommodate the need for someone who has a disability. And that's really tough. And it's tough on, I think, the company and certainly me as an HR leader. But it's really tough on the employee because that usually means this isn't going to be the right workplace for them to be able to do their best work. So I hate that side of it.
Right. You probably can't give specific examples for the sake of they're real people. But I was going to ask, like, what are some examples of things that haven't been able to be accommodated? Is there a way for you to generalize anything to share? Like, not that anyone listening should be like, oh, I should never allow these things, but just exploring what someone else's situation's been.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at flexible schedule, for example, I've worked in a lot of different workplaces. And when I worked in customer service, flexible schedule wasn't really something that could be accommodated for me. I had to be butt in seat on the phone, dialing or taking incoming calls. Yeah. And so there wasn't that flexibility to pop out. So, I do know people that needed that accommodation or they struggled with time management. So they often were late to work. And instead of asking for that as an accommodation, they just kind of got written up over time for being late. So I do think that, when you feel comfortable disclosing that you need these supports, it's really important to have what's called the interactive process. So you kind of sit down with your HR function, maybe your manager, whoever that leader is, and you go through an interactive process where you say, here are the things that are sometimes difficult for me because of my disability. And here are some accommodations I think would work really well for me. And then we kind of have a back and forth dialogue, and it's very like open communication around, all right, well, if this is what you're struggling with, here are some recommendations that we have that we can accommodate. And then maybe they've made some requests for that accommodation that we can't accommodate. And you just kind of have to find the middle ground. And I think in 9 times out of 10 for me, I'm able to find middle ground with most things. But some offices, for example, someone might say the accommodation I need is to work remotely. And that's not really a reasonable accommodation for some offices. That's just not how their office functions. So it's just not going to be the right fit for them in that organization. I have lots of examples of here's what my need is, here's an accommodation that works, but here's why it might not work, and that happens across different organizations. Different companies are run very differently. Manufacturing is probably a good example. If you work in manufacturing and you need some type of physical aid to perform your role, there may be an accommodation for that. They may have some type of tooling, et cetera, that they can provide you, but there may not be. And it may be a safety issue if you were to continue working in that role and performing that job. So, seizure disorders, probably another really good example. If you have a seizure disorder, that might be really difficult to accommodate in certain workplaces because you may need someone who's kind of like a buddy that's around and can help make sure that you're stable. There are a lot of different things that happen with all sorts of disorders. Some workplaces it works really well for, and others it just doesn't.
There's at my grocery store, there's this woman named Kitty. She's like 89 years old and she's working as a cashier checkout woman. And I will wait in her line, even if it's 10 people deep. And it usually is because everybody loves to talk to her, but she sits in a different chair than everyone else. She has her cane. She has she can't get to the water fountain. She's got her whole setup of things that she needs. But this grocery store could have been if you can't do the job, we can find someone else who does. I just look forward to seeing her and I love going to their grocery store. So there's times where accommodations could feel they're just not a good fit for the role, but really think critically about what that person brings to the table.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
A really niche example, but
no, but it is an example. And we see that every day in places that we frequent, whether we're shopping there or it's a physician's office, we're doing business with them. We see what we may not even recognize as accommodations for someone happening every day. I have this laying on my desk. This supports my wrist so that I don't have carpal tunnel syndrome. There are lots of little things that people don't probably recognize as an accommodation that totally are accommodations.
Can you really quickly clarify, are accessibility and accommodation synonymous?
So accessibility would be the result of an accommodation for most people. So if you're giving them an accommodation, it's so that there is accessibility in their role to be able to perform whatever task it is. Accessibility kind of is on two scales, right? There's the physical accessibility of a space or, being able to get into things that you need to get into to do your job. And then there are also things, built into services that we use, platforms that we use, websites that we use.
In my experience as the employee, what I loved was an all hands that was super accessible.
Yeah.
Based on learning styles. We're going to go back to what you were saying, but another way to think about this that applies to absolutely everyone, because some of us are tactical learners, some of us are auditory learners, some of us are visual. When an all hands was just data, I couldn't follow along. The more accessible an all hands is with color on the slides, have a personality, tell a story, use the data to tell everyone why this is compelling. Make sure the speakers don't stink. Do your executives need coaching on how to talk at all hands so that they're not droning like this? Have you surveyed your employees to say, did you pay attention at all in that all hands? Because I know there was not one all hands in my career where at one point I didn't tune out because I'm like, oh, this person is so boring. And it's not personal. It's just Steve, how much longer can you talk about MRR and this downward spiral? And I'm not tracking anymore. So accessibility, I just wanted to say, is another practical way to apply it. And the most expensive meeting at your company is your all hands. And if people aren't paying attention because it's only just chucking data at people and a bunch of text, that's not accessible. Is that fair to say? Or am I maybe generalizing a little too much?
No, I think that's totally fair. And, for me, what I've actually found is because of some of the disabilities in our team, we've created things to be even more accessible than we might have otherwise, whether that is the colors that we're using or making sure that the fonts are the right sizes for people to be able to see no matter what screen they're on. There are a lot of little things that people don't always think about, even in onboarding, giving people the option to read the article, but also watch a tutorial of me walking through it. Or ask to get on a call with me. That's always an open thing. A lot of times I've already created the resource, but sometimes I haven't. And people can just say, hey, can you just pop on a quick video share with me and let me walk you through what I'm coming up against, where the blocker is happening for me. And then I'm right in there, okay, do this, do that, and now you're good. So I think that, when accommodation feels like such a scary thing, but honestly, for most of my team that has asked for accommodation, it's really small things. When I have someone with dyslexia, they're really great readers that they can add as extensions on Chrome. Now, it may not help them in all of the platforms they're in, but anything that's using the Chrome platform, it kind of makes the text heavier in some areas so that it makes it easier for them to read along, because some things are only documented in the actual typed out documentation. So that's a really very quick ad for like someone who has dyslexia and wants to be able to do their job. And we even found that was an issue for someone in our team at one point. We were like, what's this performance issue? You know, why does this person need to be on a performance plan? And no, they totally didn't. They just literally couldn't keep up because this was impacting this area of their life, being able to do their jobs. So fix that and boom, no problems. You know, we're back to where we thought we were and where we wanted to be. And things happen to people throughout life. I think that's the most important thing for all of us to remember is the person who started at your company might not be the same person 5 years from then when it comes to any disabilities or anything that they learn about themselves. I, was diagnosed when I joined my company, but 2 companies ago, I wasn't, and I made it work. But to what end? I feel like I definitely could have benefited from certain accommodations. And for me, being more open about it has actually made me feel a lot more comfortable and supported. I recognize not everyone feels that they can be really open about what they're struggling with.
Right.
So that makes it more difficult for some folks.
That was a perfect parlay into my next question is you as the HR leader, you're leaning into your values and you're like transparency. Like I have ADHD. We're very proactive about accessibility at our organization. What about the employees who are too scared to ask or make the ask? How do you as an HR leader think through, am I making sure everybody has been given the chance to say, I need access to something different to do my best work?
I think for me, I always lead with like positive intent that when someone is showing a behavior, usually they're doing the best they can in that moment, right? So if I see something or a manager's coming to me to say, hey, I don't think this is going to work out, I'm asking those questions like, really, have we done everything we can do? Have you had a conversation with this person? Hey, it really sounds to me when you're describing this, like there's a lot of anxiety happening for this person. They're resisting getting on a client call because they're feeling really anxious when that happens, or they don't have all the tools they need to be able to answer the questions they're going to receive, which makes them even more anxious. And you're kind of getting yourselves into like this vicious cycle. So when we as leaders, I think, can step back and say, am I giving this person everything I can, even if they haven't disclosed they have a disability to me? Am I asking the right questions to make them feel comfortable being able to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
That's really what all of us are up against is like the trust and the comfort within our teams. And if our team sees us just firing someone who we thought weren't performing, but they were actually dealing with like an anxiety disorder, they're never going to trust us.
It's not even the cost of turnover, how it's 2 times someone's salary to replace them. I can tell you for a fact, when someone gets fired, and it was kind of hush hush that there were even issues or a few people knew, when someone gets fired, that halts everyone's productivity for days. Yeah. We work on stuff, but we're also like, did you hear Susie got let go? Oh my God, I thought Susie was great. Oh, apparently not. Well, do you know anything? I don't know. I'll ask my boss in my one-on-one. People start spending company time talking about what happened for something that could have been solved for or handled from the beginning. That takes me to my second point. I want to see if you agree. I feel like you will, is like training your managers to ask those questions. Like when an employee's not performing, I had moments where I wasn't performing because I was in the wrong role. That's a different story. But managers are scary because they're not trained and they're like, what's going on? Why isn't this campaign performing? Why aren't you doing this? Where's the attachment for this? And you're like training your managers to say, what can I do to take off your plate? And it's not permanent. It's a olive branch moment of like, this isn't going great. What is your manager? Do I need to know so I can remove the roadblock or help you figure it out? Yeah. But managers don't think like that because they're not given permission to and they're not taught to.
Yeah, I think in my team, I really see our managers as an extension of my function. And we have regular manager meetings so we can check in on the blockers their team's experiencing and we can help problem solve around those things. But as a leader, getting really comfortable with asking the hard question is honestly, I think it's the biggest reason that this like discourse happens in most organizations, right? Like the fierce conversation, the lack of candor, not feeling comfortable saying the thing is really what breaks down communication just across the board and breaks down trust and all of those things. I'm really fortunate. I've definitely had times where I've been struggling, and be it work, home, some blend of the two. Probably maybe 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I was really struggling on like all fronts of life. I just felt behind in everything. I'm so fortunate because Adam got on a one-to-one with me And it was little misses, and he was emotionally attuned enough and sort of empathetic enough to see like, this isn't normally how Christie works. So what's going on? And instead of just jumping to an assumption, right? Because any of us can do that and say, they're just disengaged. They don't want to be here anymore. That's not what he did. He just got on a call with me on our one-to-one and he was like, hey, I'm noticing that you're missing X, Y, and Z. What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, nothing accusatory. I knew I was missing X, Y, and Z. It was like, oh, I forgot to update this and I forgot to update that. And there was a lot going on, but I hadn't really talked to him about those things because it was a blend of home and work and kids and, but because he was empathetic enough to say like, I know you as a human being and I see you as a human being. This isn't normally how you perform at work. So what's happening? And then I cried.
Which is always like, you got me. And also like, thank God we can finally talk about it. Yeah.
But yeah, it was like, oh, wow. In HR in particular, no one really asks how you are. You're always asking how everyone else is. You're surveying everyone else. You want to know what's going well, what's not going well. And so to have, a leadership person who I report to him, but to have someone recognize like, hey, this is off and what's going on, I think is such a huge deal. And for managers, like if you've struggled with that, like just finding your way to get more comfortable with that. And it doesn't have to be accusatory at all. It can just be, I'm really worried about you. I noticed that these 3 things that normally you would have had completed aren't completed. Is there something going on that we should talk about?
And there's always something going on. Always. Disengagement is a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
To lots of other things unfolding in life. Sorry to cut you off. There's always something they're going through a lot personally, or they have some kind of big secret that we've been taught not to bring our whole selves to work.
Yeah.
They don't want to admit they're failing because something in their life is falling apart and it has their attention and they're depressed. They're like, they're not all depressed, but like something's not right. 100%. Yeah. No one shows up to work and like does things poorly and then like tries to like just get by. That's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I think organizations also need to have some kind of a value that ladders up to radical candor or saying what you mean with kindness. You and I have talked a lot on my last show, Flip Flops and People Ops, about radical candor, the book, and fierce conversations. And for those listening, you can't go slap a book on your executive's table and be like, we're doing a book club, because they will resist. They think they don't have time. They do not care for this fluffy psychology kumbaya stuff. But the sooner you read it and get how to speak so people will listen and listen so people will speak with kindness and to build trust, to understand different perspectives, like the beach ball metaphor that I love from Fierce Conversations. The sooner you know that information, the sooner you can model it and then get people to sort of buy in. It may not be this company, it may be your next company, who knows, but you deserve to have the knowledge and to start acting in a way that facilitates conversations like this, where your CEO asks like, what's going on? How can I help?
Yeah. And when you do the reverse, for me, getting that in return is phenomenal. But when I'm able to have those conversations within my team and talk with our other senior leaders and our managers and be candid with them and say, hey, I noticed this, like, what are your thoughts on that? Maybe my perception's off. And get the information, you're modeling, as you as a leader models, other people start to catch on to that. And they're like, oh, okay. And it is kind of formulaic. I mean, I have resources out there. If you go listen to that episode of Flip Flops and People Ops, I think that you linked my like how to have a candid conversation resource on that. But there are resources out there. You can go ask ChatGPT if you really need to. Like,
yes.
Problem I have, help me frame how to have a fierce conversation, and it will do it. I mean, it will just spit it out. Do.
I love that you brought this up because we cannot stop talking about how easy AI is to use. I know it's like when I think about Notion or Evernote, I'm like, I can't think like that. It's probably not as hard as I think it is. If you do not learn how to use AI in all the different use cases, someone who gets better at using it will be better at your kind of job. You're going to be less competitive in your arena of HR or whatever part of leadership. I've used ChatGPT to literally dictate, hey, my neighbor wants to get together. We don't really have time, but I kind of told her the other week that we would. It's just capturing everything I'm saying. And I need to let her know that we can't make it, but I'm tired. Can you just make it sound like we're really missing out and we really love being their neighbors? Hit go. It's like the perfect text message or the perfect interaction that is me. It's faster.
Yes.
And you can also ask, like, this is what's unfolding in the workplace. This is the issue. This is the other character, and this is what they care about. This is what I care about. This is how I'm feeling. What are some possible solutions? How can I think through what to do about this? You can talk to ChatGPT like it's me and you talking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are a person or you're managing a person who needs accommodations or you need them yourself, you can literally go to ChatGPT and say, I am diagnosed with ADHD and I work doing XYZ job. I would love 5 recommendations for accommodations that can make me more successful at work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to spit out things like I've already mentioned, like, okay, how about some time management, like where you have some flexibility in your schedule and, you're able to manage your time better. All right. How about a quiet workspace, right? That doesn't mean you're going to get your own office. It might mean you have noise canceling headphones on all day, but you're going to get a quiet workspace 9 times out of 10. Most companies can accommodate that. Now, if you work on a manufacturing floor, no, probably not. Yeah, they can give you noise canceling headphones, but there are going to be distractions around you, right? Mm-hmm. Use of technology aids. So whether that's like a project management tool or a digital planner, reminder app, Calendly, those are things that I use that I kind of feel like would technically be an accommodation for me. Mm-hmm. Like I can just give you a link and you go pick the time that works for you. I don't have to go through my whole calendar and try to figure out how I segment out my life. I've already got that blocked off so that you can pick one of the times that works on this calendar type. If your boss is asking you to do X, Y, and Z, and you're kind of like, I'm fading out halfway through the conversation. All right, my boss knows because I have this accommodation that after each time we have a one-to-one, he's going to document any additional tasks that I need to do in his notes. Very simple.
Can we supercharge that and say that I asked my manager to record our meetings for this very reason? I said, I want to actively listen, but I'm going to have to refer back because we're meeting for an hour and we're covering a lot of ground. So I'm not crazy. This is actually like basic human. We can't multitask. I would take the transcript and be like, what do I need to go do? From the transcript of the meeting.
Yeah. If you're using Zoom or Teams and you have Copilot or Zoom's AI tool turned on, record it. And then you can literally ask it questions. You can say, what are the 5 most important things I need to know from this meeting? And it will spit those out of you. It's incredible. AI is your friend. And then like breaks for physical activity is probably another one. So that's, a pretty reasonable accommodation for most people, being able to get up, walk around, stretch, kind of get some of that restlessness out of your body, a change of scenery for a moment. But you can also, in addition to asking ChatGPT to give you some ideas for accommodations you might want to request, you can also ask it, what would be the potential undue hardship on my company, right? So then when you get into that conversation, if you know and it knows based on your role, okay, you work on a manufacturing floor, you work in customer service, you're not going to be able to just get up and go walk around for 15 minutes every 2 hours. It's going to give you kind of like, this is the potential undue hardship. And then you as an employee, you can think about the ways that you can maybe even reasonably accommodate within yourself to make this work for your company. Your company doesn't have to give you accommodations if it brings an undue hardship on the organization.
Yeah.
Most companies are going to work with you though. This is in their favor to work with you and find solutions.
Yeah.
But occasionally it doesn't happen. And if your company is less than 15 people, they don't actually have to do this as part of the ADA. So
I want to add an exclamation point to the ChatGPT part of assuming you used it to do research. You ran it through a real scenario. It helped you think through the solutions. Assume you get buy-in, or can you please phrase this in a way that I get my executives buy-in? I get it now. We're doing this for this employee. How do I position this to the manager? How do I position this to the executive team? Whatever it is, if you need to. Then, hey, ChatGPT, go write a policy on this. Maybe, not always. Accessibility doesn't mean you're going to make a policy for everything. Hey,
you should have a policy for ADA though.
Yes, agreed. That's your homework. If you don't have one, go use ChatGPT to do that. But
or I can send you a copy of mine. Feel free to reach out. I even have some high-level accommodations for like 4 or 5 different diagnoses. So
yeah, Christy, you've been so helpful to so many of my listeners. I know a lot of people who listen to the show and are in the Community Engagement Academy will talk to me first, and we have our little level set. And depending on what they say they're struggling with, I send them to you, because if they're like a high performer who gets it, they're just earlier stage. I'm like, oh, you just got to go talk to Christie. And everyone's always so grateful at your templates, your time. You're just so giving of your expertise. And I want anyone listening, everyone to know that if you're ever struggling, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Christie. There are people in this HR space who want to help and make themselves available, and have experience seeing things go well. So
and
you're not
join
alone.
the Engagement Academy, because I'm in there and I'm pretty active in there. So
yeah, full circle. That's why we now have, I'm like not even plugging my own community, but it's also like, I just know that's where everyone's going to head. If you liked this conversation, if you like this podcast, if you're getting value, you can access Christie and I in real time at things like office hours. We get together as a community to talk, and there's resources in there, like all of the scripts over time, how to ask for budget, how to ask for more headcount, why. And for the first time ever, there's a training on how engagement works. And we're adding to it week by week, little bit by bit. It is a rinse repeat way of thinking that you can take with you in any organization. And this training doesn't exist anywhere. And it's why your SHRM certification or whatever, sometimes there's gaps in your ability of knowing, well, what do I do when my culture is sick?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't prepare me for this. I know I got to go solve for it. So we talk about that in our community, and it's a safe space for you to learn and ask questions.
Yeah. And a couple other like resources for support. If you're in the HR world and you're working on accommodations, if you're not and you want accommodations, employee assistance programs are a really great way to just kind of get very quick occupational health services. So you can talk to someone, and usually most EAP programs cover 3 visits, and you can talk with someone and really talk through what you're struggling with, and they can help give you some suggestions. But I will always and forever plug the Job Accommodation Network, which is JAN. If you have never used the JAN tool, I highly recommend it. If you're ever in the process of helping someone with accommodations and you don't know kind of where you land from a compliance, all of those things, just reach out to JAN. They're phenomenal. It is free. It's askjan.org. And they will help you just find so many solutions for people in your team, and maybe even solutions for yourself. So that is my tip of the day.
Love it. Thank you. You're always a wealth of knowledge, an array of sunshine, and super relatable. So
it's the actual sunshine finally coming in.
Mine's artificial and it's a little yellow. It's a little questionable. I am not facing the window. Well, thanks, friend. I appreciate you.
Always. And anyone who needs help, feel free to reach out.
All right. Sounds good. Hey, everyone. Have a great week, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.